Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Horror Analysis. With me, Drew. How you doing? Today, we're still in the horror tale. We're still working with our buddy, Noel Carroll. There we go. In Philosophy of Horror. We're going to be talking about the second type of plot, the Overreacher. Ooh. Now, the Overreacher plot is going to be quite a bit less common than the complex discovery plot. And the Overreacher plot, I'm actually going to give you the page numbers on because that would be helpful if you are following along the book. It'll be on page 118 through 125 for the Overreacher plot. So this is the second of our plots. The third, of course, you see on here a little bit further down. It's not really even the third, it's more the second and a half, or it's the sort of kind of one. The Fantastic, we'll get into that one next video. But this time, we're in the Overreacher plot. Like the complex discovery, the Overreacher plot has 4 terms: preparation for the experiment itself, the unintended consequences where the experiment boomerangs around, and then the confrontation with the monster. Actually, that is right here. The Overreacher is the experimenter, the one who overreaches where humans are meant to go. Classic Dr. Frankenstein, Henry Jekyll, Faust, Herbert West, Voldemort. Who's the doctor from Jurassic Park? He'd be one too. The white-haired Colonel Sanders-looking dude. Who else do I have? I have a list here. The guy from Donovan's Brain. I don't think we have his name. It's actually in here. I'm sure someplace. Overreacher. He reaches over where he should. And he does it through experimentation. First, he prepares for the experiment. He gets ready for the experiment, is the preparation. Then the experiment himself. Overreacher undertakes experiment. The boomerang, the realization that the experiment has gone terribly wrong. The unintended consequences are what's really going on here. And then confronting the experiment or the monster. Taking these part by part, I might skip from story to story. The main example most people know is going to be Frankenstein, at least the movie version of Frankenstein, where each part is pretty well preserved and split up. In the book, they sort of muddle together, and some of the things are very brief, and then some of the things are not. Pardon me. So preparation for the experiment. In the movie versions of Frankenstein, you have a lot of grave robbing. Or in Young Frankenstein, you have the breaking into the brain depository, which is fantastic. Hot water. It's actually too hot to drink. Do a little slurp. Actually, I can see the steam rising off of that. I'm not going to burn my tongue on that. Not yet, anyway. So, body part collecting, grave robbing. It's light in the book. In the book, there's a big Of course, I have it here. I have the audiobook, which I didn't like the reader on. But then there's Stephen King's approved version. There's very little going on with the experiment because most of the Frankenstein experiment talk is Frankenstein telling, I can't remember his name. It's got to be Walpole. Is the guy's name Walpole? I think it is. Yes. Walton. Robert Walton is the guy that Frankenstein is talking to. How's Walpole? Walpole's somebody else. I think he's a writer in the 1800s. Anyway, Robert Walton is also overreaching. Not the same way Frankenstein was, but Dr. Frankenstein, obviously the monster Frankenstein is Adam. Frankenstein is the scientist. Walton is overreaching. He's trying to find a northern passage to the Orient, a northwest passage. Yeah. So he's also overreaching. He's going where men shouldn't go, but not in the same way Frankenstein did. So Frankenstein, when he's talking to Walton, sees a kindred spirit and tells him his story. Basically, a word of warning: don't overreach. He tells Walton he's not going to tell any details of the experiment because he doesn't want anyone to undertake this horrible experiment. So, preparations for the experiment, very brief. I think he says something along the lines of, "You won't believe what kind of charnel houses I went through, and butchers and stuff." I don't remember the exact quote, but charnel houses, and he says, "You can't believe the kind of what I went through to get ready for the experiment." And then the experiment himself, he doesn't give any details because he doesn't want the experiment to be done because he realizes he made a horrible mistake. But in the movie version, there's lots of grave robbing for the preparation of experiment, and for the experiment itself, there's lots of this. There's lots of gadgets. There's Igor with his, hunchback in the Jacob's ladders with the little electrical arcs going up the Jacob's ladders to call it all science-y, and you can see the little valves and all this crazy stuff. I got that from Google Images. But the Jacob's ladders aren't in the book. And there's no lightning strikes. The platform with a corpse being raised up to the lightning. I didn't get that one. I did grab some movies to point out some things, but of course I forgot. The one from Van Helsing, where the Frankenstein monster gets pushed up to the... he wasn't called Adam in that. Gets pushed up to the top of the tower and the lightning hits him. Yeah. And then the boomerang. In the book, there's an instantaneous boomerang. As soon as he succeeds in his experiment, he realizes that he shouldn't have done the experiment in the first place, and he runs away like a coward, not taking blame or responsibility for what he's done, further leading to all that happens afterwards. Pardon me. I'm going to switch actually to Henry Jekyll and Edward Hyde. For a while, after the experiment, when there's not much for preparations of experiments in Jekyll and Hyde, that's sort of not delved into. The experiment itself, he makes it. Henry Jekyll becomes Edward Hyde through his potion, which is kind of subtle in the book form. That's in here too. Actually, I have a movie version of that, but it's weird. I have the David Hasselhoff musical version of Jekyll and Hyde. I've seen Jekyll and Hyde on stage. I just don't think I can handle David Hasselhoff singing it, so I actually haven't. I've had that movie for a while, but I haven't seen it yet. Musicals freak me out. I don't know what it is. If they're the least bit creepy, they creep me out. And definitely the version on stage creeped me out. I don't know if this one will. We'll see. And the other one I had, Subject 2, which I'll talk about because I like Subject 2. But Jekyll and Hyde, there's not a whole lot of talking about preparation for the experiment. The experiment itself is talked about after the fact. The boomerang comes slowly. The boomerang in the movie versions of Frankenstein sort of comes slowly because the mad scientist is really happy about his creation. My creation! But in Jekyll and Hyde, Henry Jekyll's very happy to be Mr. Hyde for a while. And then he starts to realize, uh-oh, there's unintended consequences to this. Like, Hyde's out of control. Or the monster's out of control. It boomerangs. Throw a boomerang, it comes back and hits you in the face. There is unintended consequences. Is there another word for that? Let's see. No, I don't think there is. He pretty much calls it the boomerang throughout. Well, I guess they call it unintended consequences as well. Untoward results, he also calls it. That's much better, actually. Untoward results. Results that are not good. And then, of course, having to confront these untoward results. Fight the monster yourself, in the case of the book version of Frankenstein, which he doesn't really get a chance to do. Confrontation for Henry Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Edward Hyde, is kind of weird. Excuse me. Jurassic Park is a lot of confrontation in that one. Donovan's brain, there's quite a bit of confrontation.
All those ones focus around pursuing forbidden science or pursuing forbidden knowledge or something along those lines. Herbert West would be another one. He's reanimating dead people through whatever. Very weird. His experiment itself doesn't work. Because he injects somebody in the arm and he expects a non-beating heart to circulate it around the body. What? Whatever. Anyway, sorry, Herbert West. Oh, that's better. But you can also have pursuit of forbidden magic or pursuit of forbidden religion.
The mad Arab who wrote the Necronomicon, obviously pursuing a forbidden religion or pursuing forbidden magic. Voldemort pursuing forbidden magic. Actually, Voldemort brings up a good point. So does Herbert West in a way. You can have someone who doesn't care about the untoward consequences. The destruction that's caused by the experiment could be the point. Carroll, I think he only mentions it very briefly in a footnote. Actually, what's Metropolis? Let me see if I can find it in the index. I can give you a page number for this one. .234. It's definitely in the notes section. Some Overreachers have as the point of their experiments bringing into existence a monster whose purpose is to wreak havoc. This is page 234. Note 15, which is a note about the Overreacher plot. Even though, that he has the notes at the end of his book. Yeah. Bringing the existence of monsters' purpose is to wreak havoc. One thinks here of the creation of the robot in the classic film Metropolis by Fritz Lang. Since the robot is supposed to cause destruction, one should not say that this instance is an experiment going awry. To accommodate mad scientists and magicians who create in order to destroy, this movement in the Overreacher plot might be conceptualized as the dire consequences of the experiment. Actually, that would probably work for everything. The dire consequences of the experiment instead of boomerang. Now, that fits really well, actually. However, as I already noted, in the best examples of this plot, I think these dire consequences usually result in narrative context where the Overreacher expectations have been frustrated in putatively unforeseen ways. Yeah, that's getting a little confusing, but Voldemort and the robot guy who created the robot in Metropolis did so to be... He didn't care about the consequences in Voldemort's case, and the consequences were exactly what he wanted in Metropolis's case, where I created a monster to destroy stuff. And then you have to deal with the... There's some of this in the Frankenstein movie versions, too. He doesn't really care that the monster... He's so enamored with the idea of him being all-powerful that he doesn't care if the monster's causing havoc. Definitely not the book version of Frankenstein, but that's a classic movie, later-day movie version of Frankenstein. There's a lot of that in there. Faust is in here too. That's magic knowledge that should be forbidden. And he gets magic or religion involved because it calls up a demon. Foreknowledge. So yeah. Where am I at? Oh, Jurassic Park is a good one. Preparation for the experiment. In the book form, as far as I got in the book, I couldn't finish the book because I got, a third of the way through the book and we're still talking about science. I was like, really? Haven't even introduced characters yet. It's just science. Oh my goodness. I might want to try it in audiobook. I might be better off to recommend some of these in audiobook. Out of these, I admit I didn't like Frankenstein either. I recommend the audiobook for Frankenstein. You might be able to get through it easier on that. Jekyll and Hyde, I thought Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I thought was very good.
The only thing about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is it's supposed to be a big reveal. It's like, surprise! Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde are the same person. Everybody knows this nowadays. Otherwise, it's very good. If you can get past the mystery, that's not really a mystery because everybody in this era knows that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde are the same person. Spoiler alert. Yeah. Anyone who's seen a Bugs Bunny cartoon can tell you that. But be that as it may, that's the only one I really enjoyed as a book for Overreachers. Besides Harry Potter, of course. Herbert West I enjoyed. Donovan's Brain I have yet to read. Jurassic Park I couldn't get through. So preparation for Experiment in Jurassic Park, there's quite a bit. Experiment itself, I'm assuming it goes into quite a bit as well. Boomerang, if you've seen the movie, you know what the boomerang is. And then confrontation, there's lots and lots of confrontations in Jurassic Park. You have to fight they have to fight dinosaurs. Okay, so variations. You can mix elements of the complex discovery plot and elements of the Overreacher plot. Well, first off, variations. You don't have to have all four versions, all four of these in here. You could take the preparations out. You could actually take the experiment out in, I guess you could say, in Frankenstein, the original book, there's very little talking about the experiment and preparations. Almost to the point of not having any. He admits to doing an experiment, but it doesn't talk about the experiment on purpose. Herbert West doesn't have much in the way of preparation, with the exception of collecting bodies. Well, I guess that would be part of it, but you can take any elements out. Obviously, boomerang is pretty obvious that you need to have something boomerang in here. Unless, of course, the point is to create a havoc creator. If the main character, the hero, is not the scientist, and the scientist creates a monster, to be awful, to be destructive, then there's no real boomerang, or unintended consequences, or untoward results. It's just preparation, experiment, confrontation. And you can mix each of these elements, these four, with the four from complex discovery plot. The onset, discovery, confirmation, confrontation. Obviously, confrontation is going to be the same on both. So that you can get up to a 7-term one. The one that Carroll gives an example, he calls onset, discovery, confirmation, preparation, experiment, boomerang, confrontation. I had an example that made up for that. Onset is where the audience discovers there's a monster. So there's a monster and it kills a little girl, but no one sees it except the audience. The monster kills another little person, boy, whatever, but the scientist sees it. He goes and talks to his scientist buddies and say, we have to stop this monster. He confirms that there's a monster to the scientist buddies, and they start preparing for an experiment. Then they make an experiment. They make up a potion or a ray gun to shoot or spray on or whatever to do something to the monster. and they make up the potion and they throw it at the monster. So the experiment's done, and it boomerangs because it makes the monster more powerful, and he's killing more kids. Since just go with the theme, killing kids. And then, of course, the scientists have to confront the monster in its new, stronger state. That's the example Carroll gives. This story thing is something I just came up with to sort of illustrate it. My example was preparation, experiment, boomerang, onset, discovery, confirmation, confrontation. Scientists want to make a... It's sort of subject to-ish, so I'm going to bring up subject to. Good movie. Kind of independent. A very good take on the Frankenstein tale. Instead of Victor Frankenstein, his name's Franklin Vick. The other main character is called Adam, of course. I think that might even have the girl named Elizabeth. Anyway, so preparation, guy collects a body. Experiment, he reanimates the body. Boomerang, there's a little twitch in the brain of the monster, but the guy doesn't notice. He goes out, the creation goes out into the world. Everything seems to go fine. He has a job, he has a girlfriend. Little twitch every once in a while. And when that twitch happens, he kills somebody. At first, only the audience member sees it. So we know that there's something wrong with this guy. Second time he twitches, he kills his coworkers in front of the guy who performed the experiment. Uh-oh. The boomerang has been seen by the main character. So, of course, the main character has to go to his scientist buddy and say, hey, you remember that body I reanimated? Oh, it's killing people now. So he has to confirm it with his scientist buddies. And then his scientist buddies and him have to fight the monster. Sort of subject to is. Subject to is Adam is a medical student who's angered all his professors. He gets invited by Dr. Vick to be part of his experiment. He's injected with the nanites and solution that immortality, and then he's promptly strangled by the doctor. And then he's reanimated. And then he's killed again in another weird way. And then reanimated again. And then he's getting headaches, so the doctor does lots of cutting into his back and altering his nervous system. And all this stuff, and he keeps killing him over and over again. And reanimating him over and over again. It's kind of cool. It's worth a watch. Definitely. Yeah. So, yeah, that was the Jurassic Park one. Oh, this is my Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This is Frederick March version, the one that won the Oscar. The first horror movie actor to win an Oscar for Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Yes. So what else do I have? Oh yeah. Actually, I think that's nearly it. Is it? I think it is. Yeah, I think that's nearly it. Oops, wrong buttons. Preparation, experiment, boomerang, confrontation. Pursuing forbidden science or knowledge or religion or magic. Jurassic Park, which I have here. Faust, Frankenstein, Dr. J, and Mr. H. Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Donovan's Brain. Oh, Donovan's Brain is the one that... I will point this out. The main example Carroll gives is for Donovan's Brain. I will point this out because it's one that Stephen King talks about a few times as well. For illustration, a young doctor, comes up with a way of keeping a brain alive in a vat of pink chemicals. I think it's pink. In my example, I'm just going to use pink. Soapy looking chemicals. Dish soap. Dawn dish soap. Right. So, no, it's like, whatever chemicals that scientists use. Those kind. But the scientific community scoffs at him and says, "You guys are ridiculous. You can't do that. You're playing God. Don't do that. We're not going to give you any brains to keep alive. Don't be silly." And so in his laboratory, outside of his laboratory, there's a plane crash with one dying survivor, the millionaire Donovan. There's no time to lose if he's going to... the guy's going to die either way, so he can't save his life, but he can cut out his brain and put it in the vat of chemicals before, so at least his brain is alive. And he does this, and he tries to communicate with the brain telepathically. This is where I go, what? But, skipping that. So he's communicating with the brain telepathically, and he starts, writing checks in Donovan's name, because it's perfect handwritten signature, because it's Donovan doing it, using the doctor's brain to do it. Do I have the doctor's name? I probably should. Patrick Corey is the doctor. Donovan is starting to take control of him. Eventually, in I'm not sure if it's the movie version or the book version, he almost runs down a little girl in his car when Donovan's in charge, because Donovan's a cruel bastard. So there's been about 6 movie versions of this. I think I'll mention those while I go through the history of horror section. There's at least 3 movie versions that have been mentioned. So eventually, when the guy almost runs down the little girl or something along those lines, when Donovan's in charge of his brain, he realizes, something's going wrong here. So now he has to fight against a brain in a vat who's sort of taking him over. And I think he does in the book version, but his girlfriend does in one of the movie versions, while she takes a baseball bat to the vat and smashes it, and all the chemicals run out, and the brain just sort of flops around, or something, I think in the book version he does it himself. But that's the confrontation scene, where either the assistant, the girlfriend or whatever, has to confront, or the experimenter himself has to confront the experiment that's gone wrong. So what do I have? So Donovan's Brain, Herbert West, I've mentioned. He's H.P. Lovecraft's Reanimator. stealing dead bodies and reanimating them, and then they go crazy and they kill other people. Voldemort, I mentioned, he's obviously one that doesn't care about the unintended consequences. He wants havoc or whatever. He doesn't care about the havoc. He just wants power. Pursuit of Forbidden Power. That's a good one. And Metropolis, Fritz Lang, creating a robot whose purpose is destruction. So it's not that the experiment boomerangs, it's that the experiment was evil to begin with. And the scientist in this case is aiding and abetting the bad boomeranging effects before the confrontation. You can mix this with complex discovery plot to get up to 7 terms. And of course, like complex discovery like the complex discovery plot, you can do several versions. You can go onset, prep, experiment, boomerang, discovery of monster, and then you can do another experiment, so you have another preparation period, another boomerang. You can have 5 failed experiments with different monsters running around, and different onsets and discoveries of them being bad. You can keep adding on to this. You can go onset, discovery, onset, confrontation, more onset. It can be mixed around so much. And so can the Overreacher. You can talk about the experiment before you talk about the preparation. You can talk about the boomerang before you talk about anything, sort of Frankenstein style. You can leave ones off entirely. So, yeah, that's pretty much what we have for the Overreacher. Preparation, experiment, boomerang, and confrontation. Next time, we're going to be going into the fantastic. And how fantastic will that be? I've been trying to stop myself from making that joke about 5 times, and it finally slipped out. Sorry. It's the fantastic, it's not fantastic. We'll talk about that next time. Then we're pretty much done with Carroll entirely, because a lot of the rest of the book is dedicated to psychology of horror. We'll talk about him more. Suspense is a big part of him, but I've been talking about suspense as I go along. It's sort of not a separate section. It's sort of been something I've just been chatting about. Structure of suspense. Erotic narration. Did I play with erotic narration? I don't think I did. I don't think I will, though. I might look over it and decide. So next time I'm going to talk about the fantastic. Yes. Now then we'll be going into Dance Macabre with Stephen King and his versions of the horror tale. His versions depend on what kind of monster you're talking about. So we'll be talking more about his monsters, which would be kind of cool. I'm looking forward to King. King's fun. Alright, so my name's Drew. I'll see you next time on Horror Analysis. Let's try that again. Horror Analysis. Alright. Have a good night. See you next time. Not really even the third, it's more the second and a half, or it's the sort of kind of one. The fantastic, we'll get into that one next video. But this time we're in the Overreacher plot. Like the complex discovery, the Overreacher plot has 4 terms: preparation for the experiment itself, the unintended consequences where the experiment boomerangs around, and then the confrontation with the monster. Actually, that is right here. The Overreacher is the experimenter, the one who overreaches where humans are meant to go. Classic Dr. Frankenstein, Henry Jekyll, Faust, Herbert West, Voldemort. Who's the doctor from Jurassic Park? He'd be one too. The white-haired Colonel Sanders-looking dude. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Horror Analysis. With me, Drew. How you doing? Today, we're still in the horror tale. We are still working with our buddy, Noel Carroll. There we go. In Philosophy of Horror. We're going to be talking about the second type of plot, the Overreacher. Ooh. Now, the Overreacher plot is going to be quite a bit less common than the complex discovery plot. And the Overreacher plot, I'm actually going to give you the page numbers on because that would be helpful if you are following along the book. It'll be on page 118 through 125 for the Overreacher plot. So this is the second of our plots. The third, of course, you see on here a little bit further down. It's split up. In the book, they sort of muddle together, and some of the things are very brief, and then some of the things are not. Pardon me. So preparation for the experiment. In the movie versions of Frankenstein, you have a lot of grave robbing. Or in Young Frankenstein, you have the breaking into the brain depository, which is fantastic. Hot water. It's actually too hot to drink. Do a little slurp. Actually, I can see the steam rising off of that. I'm not going to burn my tongue on that. Not yet, anyway. So, body part collecting, grave robbing. It's light in the book. In the book, there's a big... of course, I have it here. I have the audiobook, which I didn't like the reader on. But then there's Stephen King's approved version. There's very little going on. Who else do I have? I have a list here. The guy from Donovan's Brain. I don't think we have his name. It's actually in here. I'm sure someplace. Overreacher. He reaches over where he should. And he does it through experimentation. First, he prepares for the experiment. He gets ready for the experiment, is the preparation. Then the experiment himself. Overreacher undertakes experiment. The boomerang, the realization that the experiment has gone terribly wrong. The unintended consequences are what's really going on here. And then confronting the experiment or the monster. Taking these part by part, I might skip from story to story. The main example most people know is going to be Frankenstein, at least the movie version of Frankenstein, where each part is pretty well preserved. and on with the experiment, because most of the Frankenstein experiment talk is Frankenstein telling, oh, I can't remember his name. It's got to be Walpole. So, the guy's name Walpole? I think it is. Yes. Walton. Robert Walton is the guy that Frankenstein is talking to. How's Walpole? Walpole's somebody else. I think he's a writer in the 1800s. Anyway, Robert Walton is also overreaching. Not the same way Frankenstein was, but Dr. Frankenstein, obviously the monster Frankenstein is Adam. Frankenstein is the scientist. Walton is overreaching. He's trying to find a northern passage to the Orient, a northwest passage. Yeah.